It's been exactly 12 years now since the launch of the Nintendo 3DS in Japan, and now after 6 major hardware revisions, the launch and death of the Wii U, and the incredible rise of the Nintendo Switch, we're just about a month away from the 3DS eShop closing down for good, which means it's a great time to develop another one of those week-long game console collecting obsessions and whip out the old credit card.
This one has Despicable Me.
But before you get ahead of yourself, I think we need to have a quick talk about the 3DS and what exactly made it such a big deal in the first place, since it's really been a while now since Nintendo discontinued it, and there hasn't been much good news about the 3DS in more recent times. As for my system here, this little aqua blue 3DS actually means a lot to me personally, since it was the first and still to this day the only system that I've ever got new the year it came out. This one was a Christmas present, and evidently I did a decent job taking care of it, so thanks 7-year-old me for the opportunity to get this nice crisp B-roll footage. Inside, the Nintendo 3DS sports a custom system-on-a-chip, packing a dual-core ARM11 processor and custom GPU, both running at 268 MHz, along with 128 MB of system memory, and another ARM9 CPU for perfect compatibility with older Nintendo DS titles. You also get 2 GB of built-in storage plus an SD card for expansion, built-in Wi-Fi, and of course, the dual screens. The big gimmick, and yes, I am calling it out for exactly what it is, a gimmick, of the 3DS was the 3D screen, and that's not to say that it doesn't work. The glasses-free 3D is really pretty incredible, all things considered, but I really don't feel like it was ever an essential part of the experience. It's really cool at first, and I know I used it all the time back then, but coming back to it now, it almost feels like a little bit of a nuisance. It's hard to always make sure you're perfectly lined up with the screen, and after a few minutes, I can't really be bothered to put any more mental energy into trying to get the screen to look right when I can just turn the 3D slider off and actually enjoy my game. This definitely wasn't as bad on the new 3DS and new 3DS XL models that came out a few years later with eye tracking for the 3D, so you didn't have to be at just the right angle, but the 2DS also fixed this problem completely by removing the 3D. Another thing which I also mentioned in my Vita video is the actual picture quality of these two displays, but I have to admit, since I've been playing the 3DS more, if you don't put the two systems side by side, the 3DS really isn't all that bad, and since the screen on the original model is so small, the low 240 by 400 resolution really doesn't hurt it all that much, and games look pretty nice overall. Aside from that, you get all the usual game console parts like the analog stick, which is lovingly referred to as the circle pad, a D-pad, ABXY buttons, start, select, and home, and a touchscreen, everything you'd basically expect from a DS, albeit made pretty compact. And I knew the original 3DS's design was probably seen as polarizing, to say the least, but honestly, I think this is my favorite looking version of the 3DS. And the 3DS was no stranger to different hardware revisions either, ultimately getting 5 redesigns over the course of its lifetime, and some of these made a lot of sense, like the 3DS XL, giving the 3DS larger screens and a nicer form factor. And some of these made less sense, like this doorstop shape thing, which I don't mind, but I can't say I quite understand either. And in case that wasn't quite enough confusion, the new 3DS and 2DS models also added better hardware and a built-in trackpoint style nub, which some games actually used as a C-stick. I actually had the chance to try a new 3DS XL a while ago while I was replacing a speaker ribbon cable for a friend, and the bigger displays are definitely a lot nicer in my opinion. In terms of the overall feel and the way it fits in my hands, I think I'd probably say that I like the Vita more in terms of ergonomics, but this is also quite a bit more portable since you can just fold it shut whenever you want and put it into your pocket, so it's really no bigger than any other smartphone you'd see nowadays. And it seems like that ended up being a pretty big part of the marketing for the 3DS initially, with a lot of features aimed exclusively at those grass-touching types, like a built-in step counter and Street Pass, which basically looked for other 3DSs that were within range to do things like share Miis or exchange special items in compatible games. The Street Pass Mii Plaza was probably the best example of this. It was built into every 3DS and let you see the Miis of people that you were able to reach with Street Pass as visitors in your park. It doesn't have as much use now since not many people are going out and about with their Nintendo 3DS, but for a time it was a pretty fun way to waste a few minutes a day and maybe even meet people that you kept tagging on Street Pass. Speaking of the built-in software, the 3DS had some other really fun stuff as well, like a camera app that actually made use of the 2 rear-facing cameras to take 3D pictures and videos, in theory.
Unfortunately, the video quality doesn't hold up all that well today, and the microphone could use some work, but I do remember actually using this to try making some stop-motion videos, which was, I mean, it worked.
But in all seriousness, I think the reason most people would probably be interested in a 3DS right now is for the games, and there were certainly no shortage of those. There were obviously a lot of follow-ups to franchises from Nintendo's other systems like Mario Kart and Animal Crossing, and in a way, I think these games helped to keep Nintendo afloat during the rather dark Wii U era. Those two games are actually a couple of my favorites. I already loved Animal Crossing on the GameCube, so I played the heck out of New Leaf. It was a wonderful version of the game, and it actually ended up selling more copies than the Wii U sold game consoles, so it did pretty well for itself, all things considered. The best-selling game on the 3DS was Mario Kart 7, and for good reason. Mario Kart 7 didn't really feel as much like a portable version of a bigger game as it did just another mainline game in the series. It runs great, controls amazing with the circle pad rather than being stuck on the D-pad like on Mario Kart DS, and honestly, in terms of graphics, it just looks like a lower resolution Switch game, which isn't a bad thing considering how old it is. One thing that I do really miss about this generation is Download Play, a feature where you could actually send game data to other consoles around you and play multiplayer games with just one cartridge. So if you're with a bunch of friends and you want to play Mario Kart 7 but you only have one cartridge, you can just start a Download Play room and have them join. This was actually built into the DS as well, but the idea works exactly the same on both systems, and it really makes multiplayer way more fun and accessible. Not to mention, the 3DS also had free online multiplayer, which I'm sure Nintendo is just dying to get rid of as soon as they can get everyone over to Switch Online. There were plenty of other exclusives on the 3DS as well. We got a ton of Kirby games like Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot, and obviously a few Pokemon releases, and reboots of older franchises like Pilot Wings were even used to give us some other interesting examples of 3D, even if they did get worn out pretty quickly. Super Mario 3D Land is the game that I don't have open on my 3DS right now. Super Mario 3D Land also made its debut on the 3DS in 2011, and at the time this was huge because it was pretty much the first sign of things to come for the Mario series following Super Mario Galaxy. I got this game a little later into the 3DS's life cycle, but in my opinion it's probably one of the best examples out there of just a really good Nintendo game on a really good Nintendo handheld. They ended up working this concept into Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U, which I also thought was fantastic, and of course, now you can play it on the Switch, but it all started here on the 3DS. And the dedication put into working this out and polishing all of these games was very apparent. If we're on the topic of exclusives, I feel like the 3DS was really a place where developers could afford to try some really unique ideas, and I think Tomodachi Life was also a really good example of this. It's a simulation more akin to Animal Crossing, but different in the way that you don't just play as your own character, you kind of play as this omnipotent being that can manifest inside people's apartments and help them fix minor inconveniences in their lives. If you've played it before, you know it's just really fun and you know you really want a Switch release. The 3DS also has, or had depending on when you're watching this video, an enormous amount of content available on the eShop, whether they be full retail games, eShop exclusives, smaller indie titles, DSiWare, or virtual console games. It's all pretty much there, and it gives the 3DS a huge back catalog to work through if you're just not in the mood for more Mario or Kirby. Even the music that plays in the eShop right now is just really upbeat, and I don't think the reality that it's all about to go away has really set in for me yet. But unfortunately, that's the truth, and it's not going to last forever. So if you want to secure your chance to preserve your own legitimate copies of these games, you might want to consider getting that done sooner rather than later. But there will always be those extreme data hoarders that have probably already figured out a way to scrape the entire eShop to make sure these things are never really lost, and if Nintendo has decided that they're not going to support your hardware or offer a way to buy games legitimately anymore, there's always another option. You know, it's actually really easy to hack your 3DS. In all seriousness, I think the 3DS is legitimately one of the better consoles to run homebrew software on. I just decided to mod mine so I could load all my physical games off of an SD card, but there's been a lot of really creative work put into the 3DS modding scene over the past few years. This isn't going to be a tutorial since I'm sure plenty about the modding scene has changed since I first hacked my console, but I will leave a link to the excellent tutorial at 3ds.hacks.guide, which should always be up to date, so if you do want to mod your system, then go ahead and follow that. Modding offers you access to some really useful stuff right out of the gate, like the ability to dump cartridges and install them onto the home screen, manage save games, set a custom home screen theme, and a whole lot of other ways that just makes using the 3DS more fun. One of my favorite tools is probably Twilight Menu, which is just an app that installs as a regular DS game and actually allows you to boot Nintendo DS ROMs from an SD card, no flash card required. So at that point, your 3DS can basically play every 3DS, DSi, and DS title ever released, and emulation definitely isn't out of the question either, so it's not that much more difficult to get Game Boy Advance and various NES and Super Nintendo games working on the 3DS as well. So I'd say if you were already a big fan of the DS's game library and you haven't invested in a DS yet, I'm going to say the 3DS is probably going to be worth your time. So to wrap it all up, I do really like the Nintendo 3DS. I grew up with this console in my hands the same way plenty of other people before me cherished the Game Boy Color, for example. Am I sad to see the eShop closing? Well, absolutely, and I know it's only a matter of time before we lose all of the other online services on these older systems. But it hasn't happened yet, and the 3DS still offers a diverse library of genuinely great games that are worth experiencing on the original hardware, and a community to back it up. I've been meaning to get a new 3DS XL or 2DS XL before too many videos like this one come out and absolutely jack up the prices, so I should probably get on that. But either way, I think I'm pretty much done here, so I just want to say thanks to you for watching all the way to the end, and let me know down in the comments if you have a 3DS or maybe you're considering getting your first one to start collecting for the platform. Also feel free to join the Discord, link is down in the description, and that's pretty much it. So, as always, have a good one.